My husband is the definition of a hopeless romantic. In public, he's the powerful, no-nonsense CEO of a major corporation. Sharp, composed, and downright intimidating. But the moment he steps through our front door, he transforms into the biggest softie you can imagine. At home, he's like a clingy teddy bear, constantly asking for hugs and kisses, always wanting to snuggle. Honestly, he's like an overly affectionate puppy who can't get enough of me. I'm forever reminding him to focus on his work. But he never seems to take me seriously. Sweetheart, you're my whole world, he'll say with a grin, completely unfazed. Today, the company was holding a major meeting. Normally, rookies like me would be assigned seats in the back rows, far from the action. But this time, a new rule had been introduced. Everyone had to sit in alphabetical order. I couldn't help but stifle a laugh when I saw Zach, the king of sucking up to the bosses, stuck all the way in the last row. Serves him right, I thought. Let's see how well he performs without being front and center. Thanks to my last name, I ended up seated in the front row. While one of my colleagues stepped out for a coffee break, I took the chance to quickly check my phone. It had been buzzing non-stop with messages, all from the same sender. My husband, baby. I swapped my seat so I can sit closer to you when I speak later. One message read, "Why aren't you replying? Are you busy? Is your department overworked again? I'll have a word with your boss if I need to. Okay, I miss you. What do you want for dinner tonight?" One message after another popped up on the screen. I quickly typed out a reply before he spiraled into full-on panic mode. "I'm not busy, and don't scold my boss. He's innocent this time. Let's have your homemade pasta tonight." I knew if I didn't respond fast enough, he'd keep bombarding me until I gave him a proper answer. As soon as my colleague returned with her coffee, I slipped my phone back into my pocket. "Texting your husband again," she teased with a grin. "You two are seriously adorable." I just smiled and said nothing. "You know, I've never actually seen your husband before. What does he look like?" I nearly laughed. The truth was, she, and everyone else in the company, had definitely seen him. Right then, the meeting room doors swung open and a group of executives walked in. Everyone stood up to applaud their arrival. Leading the group was a man in a perfectly tailored suit. His features were sharp, his jawline was chiseled, and his whole presence screamed authority. The kind of confidence that can only come from years at the top. "Isn't our boss just ridiculously handsome?" someone whispered behind me. "For real? If the sky ever falls, he looks like the type who could hold it up with one hand." Another voice chimed in. Thomas, the rising star of the corporate world, wasn't just running a multi-billion-dollar empire. He looked like he could moonlight as a movie star. No wonder half the company was smitten. "He's looking extra sharp today," someone murmured. "Right, look at how perfectly his tie matches his suit, such impeccable taste." I had to suppress a laugh. Just this morning, Thomas had been fussing over that very tie, insisting it didn't match my outfit. He spent forever digging through the closet to find one that coordinated better. It took me 30 minutes to convince him to let it go. Yes, Thomas is my husband. We've been married for a year now. We held a small, private wedding overseas with just a handful of guests. Back home, hardly anyone knew. By choice, Thomas had pouted about it for weeks, worried that I was ashamed of him or trying to hide our relationship. Truthfully, we just didn't want to draw too much attention. As the meeting began, Thomas stepped up to the front, microphone in hand. The room fell silent. Though I could tell half the people were more focused on admiring his face than listening to his words. "I want everyone to focus on efficiency," he said, his voice clear and firm. "Let me be very clear. This company does not encourage overtime. When your workday ends, go home, spend time with your families." As he spoke, he cast a subtle but very deliberate glance in my direction, clearly referencing how I'd stayed late last week. Of course, my department completely missed the point and twisted his words into the exact opposite. "Did everyone hear what Mr. Thomas said?" Zach stood up, his tone overly dramatic. "We must respond to his call and improve our efficiency. Does anyone have suggestions?" I exchanged a weary look with my colleague Lily. "Let's hear some ideas on boosting productivity," Zach continued enthusiastically. "We'll compile them into a report." Zach was infamous for collecting everyone's input, repackaging it, and sending it off to the boss late at night. pretending it was all his own brilliant work. "Anna, let's hear from you," he suddenly called out, snapping me from my thoughts. Caught off guard, I blinked and replied, "I think Mr. Thomas meant we should leave work on time." Zach's expression soured instantly. He glared at me. "This is exactly why you're still at the bottom," he sneered. "You just don't understand what the higher-ups really want." I nearly burst out laughing. The audacity. Imagine telling me I didn't understand my own husband's intentions. By 6:30 p.m., my phone was blowing up again. This time with messages from the company group chat. "Zach, Mr. Thomas just posted in the main chat." Someone gasped. Panic flashed across Zach's face as he grabbed his phone. Sure enough, Thomas had tagged him directly. "Why is your department still working overtime? Did you ignore my instructions from today?" Meanwhile, I had 10 more messages from Thomas, all sent during the meeting. He was clearly getting more and more impatient. And honestly, I didn't blame him one bit. I could easily envision Zach fidgeting with agitation, his face drained of color as he hurriedly instructed us to punch out. After scanning my card, I made a beeline for the basement parking. As soon as the elevator doors slid open, a car was poised there, waiting for me. The moment I climbed in, I barely managed to buckle my seatbelt before Thomas wrapped me in his embrace. The fragrance of his cologne filling the air in the otherwise silent car, punctuated only by his slightly labored breathing. After a moment of reluctance, he secured my seatbelt himself. "Baby, I've been waiting for you forever," he murmured as he started the car. We made a quick detour to the supermarket to grab some groceries before heading home. Thomas preferred to keep our home free from outsiders, so he took care of all the grocery shopping and meal preparation himself. Our housekeeper only visited twice a week to clean. Once home, I lounged on the sofa, idly scrolling through my phone, while Thomas donned an apron and began to prepare the pasta sauce. As he rolled up his sleeves, his well-defined forearms came into view. When I looked up, I caught his gaze. "Why don't you come over here? Baby, you'll get a better view from up close," he suggested. At home, Thomas had one rule: I was never to stray too far from him. He needed me within his line of sight at all times. "Come here, baby," he beckoned again. I walked over, and without a word, he drew me close, trapping me between his chest and the kitchen counter. "No reason, I just wanted a kiss," Thomas said, leaning down to place a soft kiss on my forehead. "Hurry up with dinner, I'm starving," I teased. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I won't let you go hungry," he replied, whispering tenderly in my ear as he continued to prepare the ingredients. Savoring these flirtatious little moments while cooking, I was about to respond when, unexpectedly, my phone rang. To my surprise, it was Zach. I instinctively glanced at Thomas, whose expression immediately darkened. "Put it on speaker," he commanded, his voice tinged with a chilling edge. "I'd love to hear what he has to say." I switched the phone to speaker mode, and Zach's voice filled the room. "Anna, I've noticed you've been clocking out on time recently. Seems like you're quite efficient at work. How about this? Write me a report tonight and leave it on my desk before work tomorrow." So now, clocking out on time has become a crime. Thomas's face grew stormy, and just as he was about to speak, Zach hung up abruptly. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved for Zach or pity him. "Well, you go ahead and finish cooking. I'll get started on that report," I said, trying to make a quick escape. But Thomas was quicker. He caught me before I could slip away. "Forget the report, it's after hours now, and as the boss's wife, you don't need to answer to him. I'll fire him tomorrow," Thomas stated firmly. "Don't be like that," I protested. "Zach's not a bad guy. Sure, he's a bit bureaucratic, but he's competent. You need to be more rational, Thomas. It's important to manage talent," I urged, trying to talk some sense into him. He shouldn't get so caught up in being my doting husband that he neglected his responsibilities. Other CEOs were constantly jet-setting, reviewing documents, and planning for their company's future. But Thomas, the moment he clocked out, it was straight to the grocery store and then home to cook for me. Unless the company was literally on fire, he wouldn't even glance at his phone after hours. But I had to admit, his culinary skills were impeccable. The meat sauce he was simmering smelled heavenly, Thomas had perfected Italian cuisine and was always so considerate when preparing our meals. He even woke up early to make me breakfast every day. The next morning, I woke up to find breakfast already waiting: warmed milk, heart-shaped fried eggs, and sandwiches filled with my favorite cartoon-themed toppings, layered with fresh vegetables and meat. In contrast, Thomas's own breakfast was nothing but a simple cup of coffee. "Baby, are you still feeling unwell?" Thomas asked, his voice dripping with concern. "Do you want to take the day off? I can talk to HR and tell them you don't need to come in." "You better shut up," I muttered. If I was feeling sore, it was entirely his fault for what he did last night. How could he not realize that? After breakfast, we headed to work together, but as usual, he stopped a block away from the company, insisting I walk the rest of the way. He never let me leave without a goodbye kiss, which often turned into a full-on makeout session that made me run late. Today was no exception. Barely making it on time, I swiped my card just as Zach's sour face greeted me. "Is that report done? Let me take a look," he demanded. "Not yet." I scrambled to come up with an excuse when a voice called out from behind me. "Zach, Mr. Thomas wants to see you upstairs." Zach's expression shifted instantly, his annoyance morphing into a forced obsequious smile. The messenger was Thomas's assistant, the only one in the company who knew my true identity. Once they left, I returned to my desk while my colleagues continued gossiping about yesterday's meeting. God, I couldn't stop laughing at Zach getting chewed out like that. One of them said, "Our boss is amazing, actually paying attention to the well-being of us low-level employees." Zach had never imagined that he would be publicly reprimanded by the boss for not letting people leave work on time. While I powered up my computer, I couldn't resist eavesdropping on their conversation. Suddenly, my desk neighbor Lily whistled, complimenting Anna on her appearance. Confused, I glanced at her. She handed me a mirror, and my eyes widened in horror. What the hell? When did Thomas give me a hickey on my neck again? Worse, I hadn't covered it up. How embarrassing. I was about to call Thomas and give him a piece of my mind when I saw his messages on my phone. "Baby, I'm already in the office. It's getting colder today. Make sure to cover your legs with a blanket. Come nap in my office at lunch. It's too cold to rest on your desk." Thomas's meticulous reminders kept coming, leaving me with no room to stay mad at him. Around noon, Zach returned to the office looking pale and shaken. It was clear he'd been severely scolded. Thomas, known for his biting sarcasm when angry, could reduce someone to shreds with his words. Lily and I headed to the company cafeteria for lunch. The food wasn't as good as usual, probably a new chef, so I casually mentioned it to Thomas. His immediate response was, "Then come to my office for lunch after eating. You can take a nap here too." He even sent a cute kissing emoji. Imagine that. A grown man over 6 feet tall using such an adorable emoji. Who could resist? Back at the office, we were all surprised. Although it was only early November and the weather had just turned chilly, the office was already cozy with the heating on. "What's going on?" someone asked. "It's a new company policy," another colleague explained. "Now that it's getting colder, we'll have the air conditioning turned on for warmth during lunch breaks, and the break time has been extended by half an hour." Anyone could guess this was Thomas's doing. During lunch break, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "Baby, are you sure you don't want to come up and rest? I can even warm the bed for you." "Was the food not good today?" "I'll have the admin department handle it." "What do you want for dinner?" "I'll make it up to you," I replied absent-mindedly, half engaged in our chat. Later in the afternoon, just before the end of the workday, the office buzzed with new gossip. The admin department announced that the company was hiring new chefs and that we could vote on what dishes we wanted on the menu, which would be updated weekly based on our votes. "Oh my God, our boss is so considerate," someone exclaimed. Lily leaned on my shoulder with a sigh. "Seriously, our boss is so thoughtful. I'm so envious of the boss's wife. Imagine being married to such a handsome and caring man." I nodded nonchalantly. Honestly, being with Thomas was the best thing that ever happened to me. Even now, I sometimes wake up in disbelief, wondering if I'm still dreaming. But then I see him beside me and realize it's all real. This perfect, 1 in a million man is truly my husband. While we were chatting happily, the deputy general manager, Sarah, suddenly appeared. "Sarah, what brings you here?" Zach greeted her with his usual sycophantic smile. Sarah glanced at her watch and said softly, "I'll be going on a business trip with the boss. But we need someone else from the department to join us." "I understand," Zach said quickly. "I'll get everything prepared right away. Once the meeting is over, I can be ready to go." "No need," Sarah cut him off and turned her gaze to me. "Anna, please get ready. The flight is at 9:20 tomorrow morning. Don't be late." And with that, Sarah left, her efficient style leaving no room for questions. As soon as she was gone, Zach's expression darkened. He shot me a cold, disdainful look. "Well, since you have a trip tomorrow, you might as well head home early today to prepare." When my colleagues found out I was going on a business trip, they were all envious. After all, traveling with the boss meant enjoying excellent perks. Personally, I wasn't particularly excited. Perhaps it was because Thomas and I often traveled together for leisure, but this was the first time we'd go on a work trip together. When I got home, just as I expected, Thomas was in the walk-in closet packing our luggage. After checking the weather forecast, he thoughtfully pulled out an extra jacket for me. "This trip won't involve much work, but it'll take quite a bit of time," he explained with a hint of exaggeration. "The thought of not seeing you for so long was unbearable. So I had no choice but to bring you along." He even threw me a smug look. "Am I your lucky charm or something?" I thought. Little did the people at the office know. The real reason Thomas brought me along on this trip was simply because he couldn't stand being away from me. The next morning, Thomas's assistant came to pick us up, and we arrived at the airport to find Sarah already waiting. When she saw Thomas and me standing together, her expression showed a flicker of surprise. I quickly explained that we had just run into each other at the airport entrance. Thomas, however, seemed entirely unconcerned, while Sarah's gaze held a mix of curiosity and a tinge of hostility. Yes, hostility. A woman's sixth sense never lies. The assistant had booked 4 first-class seats. As we were about to board, Sarah sidled up to me. "Never flown first class before, huh? Well, here's your chance," she said with a touch of condescension. Ahead of us, Thomas turned to glance at her, his expression hidden behind his sunglasses. I let out a soft chuckle. "Not really. But I have flown first class before when traveling the world with my husband." Despite half his face being obscured, Thomas couldn't conceal the smile that played at his lips. Sarah, on the other hand, gave me a sidelong glance and dryly remarked, "How charming you and your husband make quite the pair." Once we boarded the plane, I was taken by surprise as the assistant had arranged for Thomas and me to sit together in the front, while Sarah and the assistant themselves took the seats behind us. Just as I was settling into my seat, Sarah approached briskly. "Thomas and I need to discuss some work matters. Could you move to the back?" she demanded. I frowned, but before I could even reply, Thomas removed his sunglasses, his annoyance clear. "Whatever it is, it can wait until after we land." "Go back to your seat," he said firmly. Sarah didn't argue, but as she turned to leave, her look was laden with meaning, and she walked back to her seat with a defiant click of her high heels. I ended up dozing off during the flight. When I awoke, I found myself not only covered with the airline's blanket but also draped with Thomas's jacket. Keen to avoid drawing attention, I quickly returned his jacket before Sarah could notice. Thomas gave me a look of mock indignation. "You owe me for this," he joked. Although we were on a business trip, not at home, upon our arrival at the hotel, the receptionist handed us 4 room cards, all on the same floor. Sarah accepted the cards with a smile. "It's truly a privilege to have Mr. Thomas with us this trip, otherwise, we'd never get to stay in such a nice hotel," she noted. Thomas kept his usual stoic demeanor, appearing unimpressed by anything. Yet when we were alone, his affectionate side came out. If I didn't know him so well, I might have suspected a dual personality. I kept a slight smile but remained silent, sensing that Sarah's comment had an undercurrent directed at me. Her intentions seemed far from simply appreciating Thomas's generosity. After checking in, the assistant suggested we rest and start fresh the next day. No sooner had I reached my room than I received a text from Thomas. "Baby, I miss you." His message made me chuckle. "Really, Thomas? Do you think I'm oblivious to your antics?" I considered dismissing his playful advance, but then he sent a picture of a small pink pouch. "Baby, Your sleep mask somehow ended up in my suitcase. Do you want me to bring it over, or will you come and fetch it?" Reluctantly, I made my way to Thomas's room. I had barely knocked when the door swung open, and a strong arm pulled me inside. As the door closed, I caught a glimpse of Sarah's door opening across the hall. The surprise on her face was unmistakable. "It's over. I don't think I can keep my identity hidden much longer," I sighed, having enjoyed only a few days of peace. Thomas, however, seemed unconcerned as he massaged my shoulders while I applied my makeup. "We're married, not sneaking around. Who cares if someone finds out?" he reasoned. "But what if she spreads it around? Then the whole company will know," I argued, loathing the idea of being confined at home with nothing to do. Whenever I considered switching companies, Thomas would become overly protective, worrying I might be mistreated. But working in his company while keeping our relationship secret meant I could never fully engage in office gossip or casual chats with colleagues. "Don't worry, I'll have a word with her," Thomas reassured me, his hands wandering again. I swatted him away. He would probably love nothing more than to announce our relationship to the entire world. Deciding to bide my time, I waited to see if Sarah would confront me, but she remained silent the entire day. I began to wonder if I had imagined that meaningful look she gave me. On the third day, Thomas attended a meeting with business partners, and his assistant joined him at a banquet. Meanwhile, Sarah and I shared a taxi back to the hotel. Out of the blue, she asked, "Anna, how long have you been married to your husband?" "Just over a year, almost 2 now," I responded. "That's still the honeymoon phase, isn't it?" Sarah remarked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Everyone says there's always someone better out there. But we should appreciate what we have, don't you think? I can't stand those who are married but still play around," she added, her words dripping with implication. Playing along, I agreed. "Absolutely, that's why I treasure my husband dearly." "Good," she replied with a mocking tone, "because if it wasn't yours to begin with, it's best not to dream about it. Sometimes, even if you manage to grasp something, you might not be able to hold on to it." I smiled thinly and retorted, "But Sarah, do you think you could keep it if you had it?" I was not blind to her intentions, and her question hung in the air between us. Her smile vanished, replaced by a frosty expression. "Men don't just go for looks, especially successful ones," she said coolly. "They care about what a partner brings to the table. You're still young, so don't waste your potential." When we arrived at the hotel, I watched her rummage through her purse for her room key. I couldn't help but chuckle and casually remarked, "Have you ever considered that Thomas might actually be my husband?" Though Thomas and I had always kept our relationship low-key, he never tried to hide the fact that he was married. He wore his wedding ring proudly, never once taking it off. Sarah let out a short, disbelieving laugh and gave me a once-over. "You really are a dreamer." The business trip stretched out to more than 2 weeks. My role during this time was mostly behind the scenes, dealing with small, unremarkable tasks. So I couldn't really blame Sarah for having her doubts about me. Still, I had to smile quietly to myself. Who was the one dreaming, really? As if to prove a point, Sarah threw herself into her work over the next several days, going above and beyond to demonstrate her value. She constantly sought Thomas's attention, jumping at every opportunity to present her ideas or highlight her accomplishments. Eventually, even the assistant had to gently intervene. "Miss Sarah, your dedication is appreciated," she said kindly, "but there's really no need to push yourself so hard. Mr. Thomas values his personal time. Please be mindful." I nearly laughed out loud at the look on Sarah's face. Despite all the subtle jabs she'd thrown my way, here she was, practically doing unpaid overtime to benefit my husband's company. And yet, she honestly believed she had a shot at winning him over. How delusional. After the project wrapped, Thomas gave me 3 days off to rest. But when I saw that Sarah was already back in the office, working diligently as if nothing had happened, I couldn't shake the guilt. I was part of the team too. After all, I only lasted a day at home before I decided to head back to work, but the moment I walked into the office, I noticed something was off. People were staring, not openly, but I could feel it. There was a shift in the atmosphere. During lunch, Lily pulled me aside and whispered, "Did you do something to upset Sarah during the business trip?" Yesterday, while you weren't here, she publicly criticized one of your reports in a meeting. I was stunned. I shook my head. No, not that I know of. That afternoon, Sarah called for yet another department meeting to review the previous month's performance. Near the end, she zeroed in on me. Anna's performance last month was disappointing. I hope you can take your work more seriously this month and show some real improvement. That made it 2 days in a row she'd called me out in front of everyone. It wasn't subtle anymore. Sarah was clearly targeting me, and the shift started right after the business trip. After work, several colleagues gathered around to comfort me. One of them suddenly grabbed my hand with a look of realization. I get it now. You must have spoken to Mr. Thomas during the trip, right? I held back a laugh. If only they knew the truth. I don't just talk to Thomas. I sleep next to him every night because he's my husband, but looking at how serious they all were, I decided to play it safe. Oh, last time I just happened to run into Mr. Thomas in the hotel restaurant, I said casually. We exchanged a few words, that's all, apparently. Even something that minor was enough to set Sarah off. If a simple hello could rile her up this much, I couldn't begin to imagine what would happen if she knew the full truth, and so, the tension continued to build. Just as expected, I was summoned to Sarah's office a few days later. She reviewed my latest report with an unnecessarily critical eye, pointing out supposed flaws that made little sense. Then, with a look of contempt, she tossed the papers back at me. Take this back and redo it. What is this garbage? Don't bring junk like this to me again. It was almost laughable. Sarah clearly enjoyed wielding her authority, even if it was over the CEO's wife. I walked out of her office, report in hand, and returned to my desk. Immediately, several co-workers gathered around, looking worried. If even your proposal got rejected, what chance do the rest of us have? One of them sighed. I gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder and chuckled softly. Don't worry, yours will be fine. Deep down, I knew the truth. Mine was the only one that got torn apart. Sure enough, that afternoon Sarah sent a message in the department group chat. I've reviewed all the proposals. They're all excellent, except Anna's. Hers was unacceptable. Please revise and resubmit it to my office by tomorrow morning. Lily gasped as she read the message. Oh no, Anna, you've fallen into the office death trap. You're officially on the boss's blacklist. I didn't say anything. I just quietly got to work on revising the report, but Lily, ever the gossip, couldn't hold back. Wait, isn't Mr. Thomas already married? Why is Sarah still chasing after him? Seriously, another colleague muttered. She acts like she's all modern and independent, but I once heard her drunkenly say that Mr. Thomas's wife must be some pampered little canary who doesn't deserve him. She said only a self-made woman like her could truly be his equal. But no one's ever actually seen Mr. Thomas's wife. Someone else added. Lily glanced around to make sure no one was listening in, then leaned in and whispered conspiratorially. I could almost visualize the scene unfolding. Mr. Thomas's wife was apparently working right here in our company. My heart raced, and I leaned in closer, my curiosity reaching its peak. Could it be that they had figured out my secret? I swear, I heard it from Mr. Thomas's assistant, Lily confided, having accidentally let the details slip. A chorus of gasps echoed around the room. Wow, the boss's wife has been right under our noses this whole time. Lily turned to me with a penetrating gaze. Let me ask you something, she said. My palms sweating as I swallowed hard. What is it? I stammered. Do you know who Mr. Thomas's wife is? I shook my head quickly, trying to mask my nervousness. Lily sighed in disappointment. I thought, since he even brought you on the business trip, you might know. How boring, she muttered under her breath. I breathed a silent sigh of relief and turned back to my computer to continue revising my report. Then, Lily's next sentence struck like a bomb, freezing everyone in the room. Have you guys ever considered that it might be Sarah? Lily's analysis was surprisingly thorough. Thomas is married, and his wife works right here. No wonder the company benefits are so good. Have you noticed how Sarah always acts so arrogantly? Anyone who gets too close to Thomas seems to become her target. I wouldn't rule out the possibility that she's his wife. I had to admit, even I, the person directly involved, wanted to applaud her for such a keen observation. Within a week, this gossip had spread like wildfire, becoming the main topic of conversation during lunch breaks throughout the company. Meanwhile, Lily, the originator of the rumor, was now trembling with fear. "What if Thomas finds out? Will I get fired?" she asked, her voice shaky. I reassured her, "You won't be fired, after all. Thomas is so focused on his work during the day that he wouldn't bother with these office rumors." But Lily interjected, "I think Sarah has already heard about it. Have you noticed how she's been acting weird lately, carrying around even more expensive bags, and sometimes when I ask where she's going to eat, she just looks shy and doesn't answer?" I was clueless about Sarah's recent behavior, between endless revisions on my proposals. I had neither the time nor the energy to monitor her movements. I thought it was just idle speculation, but a week later, another bombshell dropped. Jerry, the marketing manager, confronted Sarah in her office with the door wide open, allowing the entire office to overhear their heated argument about budget issues. Jerry had a solid point, but then Sarah, with a playful toss of her hair and a smirk, conceded, "All right, this is my fault. I'll talk to Thomas about the budget tonight." Everyone knew that Thomas couldn't be contacted after work hours. Sarah's words virtually confirmed her marriage to him. Jerry's face turned pale, and after a quick apology, he slunk away. As Sarah walked out of her office, she shot me a parting glare. "Please don't mention today's incident to anyone. I prefer to keep things low-key," she said with a forced smile. Later that night, as I mulled over the situation, Thomas, clearly upset, grabbed my face in frustration. "It's our couple time. What are you thinking about? You're ignoring me," he complained. I struggled to change the subject. "Aren't you still looking at the partnership proposal? I heard the assistant said you need to review the documents soon." Thomas brushed it off. "Forget it, we can do it tomorrow. I work fast, it'll be fine," he insisted, leaning in closer. Just then, my phone rang. Thomas clenched his teeth in annoyance as we both stared at the ringing phone. I answered the call, and Sarah's furious voice blared from the other end. "Look at this proposal you sent me. I can't understand a word of it. Rework it and have it on my desk before work tomorrow, or I'll deduct your pay." Thomas's temper flared, snatching the phone from my hand. He snapped, "If you don't understand the proposal, then learn something. Don't bother her after work hours. Just leave her alone." Before slamming the phone down, Thomas dropped my phone on the floor with a frustrated sigh, leaving me dumbfounded. "Oh no, how am I going to face Sarah tomorrow?" I worried. The next day, I arrived at work feeling completely drained. As soon as I sat at my desk, a stack of documents was abruptly thrown in front of me. Sarah stood there, her expression dark and furious. "Get all these done. If you can't finish them, stay late. I want them all tomorrow," she ordered coldly. The stack was nearly a week's worth of work, and even Zach couldn't hold back. "Miss Sarah, this is too much. Is it urgent? If so, I can have others stop their work to help get this done," he suggested. Sarah abruptly turned to glare at him, her eyes blazing with fury. How could she not finish this? She has time to seduce other people's husbands, doesn't she? I'm sure she has plenty of time for work. The room fell utterly silent, and everyone gasped in shock. "Isn't there some misunderstanding here? Anna's not like that," Lily interjected, forcing a nervous laugh and nudging me to explain. I stood up, locking eyes with Sarah. "Is Thomas your husband? Is that why you're so concerned about what I'm doing?" The room erupted in gasps, and I knew I would be the talk of the company for the next week. "You admit it, you seduced Mr. Thomas and climbed into his bed," Sarah screamed, her voice tinged with hysteria. She lunged at me, and I had to quickly step back as several people rushed to hold her back. Her usual polished appearance was gone, her clothes were disheveled, and her eyes burned with hatred as she glared at me. As the scene became more chaotic, I decided to call Thomas. "Hey babe, miss me?" I said into the phone, keeping my tone light. Thomas's deep voice filled the speaker, and since I was on speakerphone, everyone in the room could hear clearly. Sarah froze, her body going rigid. Lily's eyes widened in shock. "So, you're the boss's wife," she whispered. I smiled slightly, realizing it would be hard to keep a low profile at the office after this. Thomas arrived within minutes, his expression serious. Sarah's eyes shook with disbelief as she muttered to herself, This can't be happening. Thomas walked toward me, took my hand, and lowered his voice. What happened? Is someone bullying you? I briefly explained the situation, and Thomas's frown deepened. He pulled me closer, his arm protectively around my shoulders as he addressed the room. Yes. Anna and I are married. We've kept it quiet because we wanted her to work without distractions. He paused, glancing at Sarah, who was still shaking her head in denial. Let's talk in my office, Thomas suggested, leading me away. I could either stay and face a barrage of questions or endure the suffocating silence that was sure to follow. I chose to retreat. In Thomas's office, he personally made me a cup of milk, his way of offering comfort. Sarah remained nearby, glaring at me with venom. Before long, the HR director arrived with some colleagues. We need to discuss Sarah's departure, the HR director announced. Are you firing me just because of her? Sarah's eyes widened as she pointed at me. Thomas stepped in front of me, blocking her view. She's my wife. I won't let anyone bully her. Sarah was finally escorted out by the HR director, her angry shouts echoing down the hall. Thomas leaned against me, his voice playful yet tinged with hurt. You didn't tell me about all this. You don't trust me, do you? I'm so sad, I sighed, looking up at him. No, it's not that. I just didn't want to make things harder for you. He grinned, pulling me closer. It's not hard at all. I only need you. Darling, the company's yours. You can do whatever you want. Thomas continued to tease me, clearly enjoying the moment, though I couldn't help but feel he was playing the role of the wounded party to gain my sympathy. Just then, the office door swung open, and the HR director, looking pale, rushed in holding a stack of papers. I'm sorry, Mr. Thomas, I didn't see anything, she stammered. Thomas's cool, detached image was completely shattered, but true to form, he snapped back into his usual aloof self in an instant. Next time knock before you come in. What is it? He said, his tone ice cold again. The HR director, visibly trembling, handed him the documents. Thomas signed without a word. Once the papers were signed, the HR director quickly left the office, practically running. Sarah had been fired. I stayed home for 2 days to avoid the office gossip and finally went back to work. The people in the office greeted me as usual, as if nothing had changed. The year-end meeting was fast approaching, and once again, we were seated in order according to the first letter of our names. Lily looked at the message from the admin team and sighed softly. I just found out that it's all Thomas's doing. Even if your name doesn't start with an A, the admin will find a way to get you a seat in the front row. I blushed and stayed silent. Why not just give you your own seat in the front, reserved for the boss's wife? She teased. I couldn't help but think that Lily really knew how to read her bosses, after all. Thomas had thought about doing exactly that a while back. At the meeting, Thomas gave his usual speech about the company's future, but his eyes occasionally flickered to me. After he finished speaking, he actually sat down next to me. I wondered why there was still an empty seat beside me. But as soon as the meeting ended and everyone started to leave, I suddenly felt dizzy. Before I could react, I blacked out and fell forward. Anna, babe, I heard voices calling out as I fainted. As I opened my eyes once more, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. To my side, Thomas was there, diligently peeling fruit for me. What happened? Am I seriously ill? I inquired, anxiety flooding my thoughts. Babe, Thomas began, his voice brimming with excitement. You're pregnant. He grasped my hand, his joy unmistakable. The doctor mentioned you're a little over a month along, but you've got low blood sugar, so you'll need to be extra cautious. I was stunned, pregnant with Thomas's child. As the reality set in, I prepared to head home later that afternoon. Before we left, Thomas decided to meticulously copy down all the pregnancy care instructions displayed on the hospital wall. Dressed sharply, he fervently scribbled notes in his notebook, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Why don't you just snap a photo and read it later at home? I joked. That won't do, he replied earnestly. A good memory is no match for a reliable pen. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Ever since discovering our impending parenthood, Thomas had been adamant that I stay home and refrain from returning to work. He became quite the household guardian, even chiding me if I so much as attempted to boil water. Your job right now is to rest, he insisted, poring over nutrition guides. "If you need anything, just let me know." I chuckled at his earnestness. "But my limbs are practically useless now. Do you think you can manage everything?" I teased. "Of course, I can," he responded confidently, pulling out yet another book from his burgeoning collection. This one was titled Maternal and Infant Care, and beside it, another called Mood Regulation for Pregnant Women. Over the 7 months of my pregnancy, numerous colleagues visited to check on me. They all marveled at how Thomas tirelessly took care of every detail. Lily gave me a thumbs up. "We all want to know, how do you manage to keep Thomas so devoted?" she asked. I smiled and shrugged. "It's not about keeping Thomas in line, he's just utterly in love. Besides, pampering, caring for, and listening to your wife is what a good husband is supposed to do." Right, everyone laughed, but deep down, I felt an overwhelming sense of fortune. Thomas's unwavering dedication made me feel incredibly lucky to have him by my side. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video.